Hello everybody, my name is Rachel. Today I'm going to do my January 2019 book haul, the first book haul of 2019 and probably the last one for some months, since I am basically on a book buying freeze until March-ish probably, though cross fingers I get some things for my birthday. I hope I do. I have some very anticipated things on my birthday wish list. But anyway, let's talk about what I have here and now rather than those things I am expecting. I'm going to do this in two batches. The first batch are books that I've already read. Some of them I've talked about relatively recently, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. And then I will talk about the batch that I haven't read yet. And spoilers, most of those are SF Masterworks. Clearly I need to get a move on and read more of the SF Masterworks that I've been collecting. So first up, I'm going to talk about trade comics. I've talked about 3 of these in my last wrap-up, so I'm not going to do anything more than mention them here. So I have Giant Days Volume 8. This is written by John Allison and the artwork is by Max Sarin. It continues to be a ton of fun. Then I have Descender Volume 6, The Machine War, which is written by Jeff Lemire and the artwork is by Dustin Nguyen. And it's the conclusion. I liked it, though I just didn't quite get the emotional feels when I was reading this. I need to reread it. I think it was me, not the story itself. And then there is The Wicked and the Divine Volume 7, Mothering Invention. This is written by Kieron Gillen. The artwork is by Jamie McKelvie, and I think the colorist is Matthew Wilson. And this series continues also to be great. The second half of it has really hit its stride. And then the other comic I have is Monstress Volume 3, Haven. This is written by Marjorie Liu and the beautiful artwork is by Takeda. I read this months ago and it is one of those very ornate, complex, like Oriental inspired steampunk fantasy series, and I need to reread it to get the most out of it. There's just so much going on and it is a delight to look at as well. I admire the artwork so much in this one. Another one I've talked about very recently is So Far So Good, Final Poems 2014 through 2018 by Ursula K. Le Guin. I also talked about this in some of my interest in getting into poetry and finding the poetry that works for me in my last wrap-up, and I very much enjoyed this and I am hoping to get a couple other of Le Guin's poetry collections to try them out. I really like the imagery and the topics of her poems, and I don't know, they feel like real poetry to me, whereas a lot of modern poetry, stuff like Rupi Kaur's work for example, I don't really feel like it's poetry, but that's a matter of personal taste. This, I think, is what I really like. Next, I have another Modern Masters of Science Fiction book. This is the one on Lois, McMaster, Bujold by Edward James. I read this recently, though I haven't talked about it in a wrap-up yet, and I quite liked it, though I didn't give it 5 stars because I felt like it was actually somewhat incomplete. That is the danger of doing a critical analysis of an author's work when they haven't stopped writing yet. So when this was written, Bujold still hadn't written her Penric and Desdemona novellas in the world of the 5 gods, which, though it is fantasy, is talked about in here, and she hadn't published the last Vorkosigan novel either. And those 2 omissions, if they had been included, I think some of the discussion would have been a bit different actually. But otherwise, it was very interesting. This is much more thematic than biographical, unlike the other 2 Modern Masters of Science Fiction works I've read, most likely because the author is still living and so on. I did find it very interesting, and I really want to reread the Vorkosigan saga now. Speaking of Bujold, I got my Subterranean Press hardcover edition of The Prisoner of Limnos, which is the last Penric and Desdemona novella so far. I hope there will be more, but this may be the conclusion. I did a whole reread of this novella series in 2018. I talked about some of them in my favorite rereads of 2018 video actually, so you can refer to some of my previous videos if you want to know more about this. The Prisoner of Limnos in particular is the like 3rd part of the story that begins in Penric's mission. You can't read it on its own, it's the last and you shouldn't skip to this one. It will make no sense if you haven't read the previous ones, and I really loved it. A couple of months ago, I did an unhaul video where I got rid of a previous edition of this next book so that I could get the SF Masterworks edition because, like, I collect those. And that is Synners by Pat Cadigan. This is one of her really famous cyberpunk novels. I read it a couple of years ago and I liked it, though with some big caveats in that it's not my favorite book by Cadigan. I think I liked Fools more. And cyberpunk is never going to be my favorite genre, but this was a good book and I thought it'd be worth it to have the nice SF Masterworks edition of it. So I have that. I'm kind of hoping that some more of Cadigan's books are included in this line because, like, they're totally deserving of that. I don't remember that much about what this book is other than it is cyberpunk and it involves, like, literally jacking things into people's brains, which I thought was, you know, it was a good story though. And lastly, for the books that I've already read, I got a copy of Waistcoats and Weaponry by Gail Carriger. This is book 3 in her Finishing School series, which is a young adult quartet in her Parasol Protectorate universe. It is set like a generation before the books focusing on Alexia Terabati, I believe. Maybe don't quote me on that because I'm not an expert in the chronology of this universe, but it takes place before Solace and those books. And I do remember what these books are about, so I can say a little something about them. The series follows a teenage girl named Sophronia who is sent to a finishing school, which unbeknownst to her family is literally a school where young women learn to finish people, where they're kind of trained to be spies and assassins and things like that, undercover agents for the realm, and it's so much fun. Now for the books that I haven't read yet, we'll start with the one that is not an SF Masterwork. This is Then Will the Great Ocean Wash Deep Above. That makes no sense. By Ian Sales. This is the third story in his Apollo Quartet. I've read the other 3. I think you can read them in whatever order you want to. If I remember correctly, all of these are basically different alternate history retellings of the Apollo missions, you know, going to the moon and such. And I found all 3 of the ones I've read so far very interesting, and they're all extremely short. I would call these novellas probably. So I don't know what this one is about. I'll read the back of it because it's been a while since I've read some of these. April 1962 and the Korean War has escalated. All the men are away fighting, but that doesn't mean the space race is lost. NASA decides to look elsewhere for its astronauts, the 13 women pilots who passed the same tests as the original male candidates, the Mercury 13. One of these women will be the first American in space. Well, I'll stop reading there because I don't want to spoil too much, but I did not know this was going to have women pilots and women candidates for being astronauts, so I'm actually really excited about that. Obviously, I've really enjoyed Mary Robinette Kowal's Lady Astronaut books, which deals with a very similar idea in a similar timeline, like in the 50s and 60s, so okay, I'm actually very excited for this one now. And now for all those SF Masterworks. So the first one is Raft by Stephen Baxter. This is the first book in his Zeely series, which I have heard the name of so much, but never knew any of the books that was in that series. As you can see, I've actually started reading this one. I'm a couple chapters into it and I'm really liking it. This has a very long description on the back, but I'm going to read a little bit of it. A spaceship from Earth accidentally crossed through a hole in space-time to a universe where the force of gravity is 1 billion times as strong as the gravity we know. 500 years later, the descendants of the original crew still struggle for existence, divided into 2 main groups. Reese is a miner whose curiosity about his world makes him stow away on a flying tree carrying trade between the belt and the raft, and what he finds will change his world. I find the concept of this to be extremely intriguing, and I've really enjoyed the first couple of chapters so far. This next one is actually an anthology. It is Dangerous Visions, edited by Harlan Ellison. I think this may be one of the most famous anthologies in the history of science fiction. I've heard of it. I think it was originally published back in the 1970s, and I'm pretty sure that it made a huge splash just because it contained so many famous writers and a bunch of stories that were nominated for major awards that year. And while I have feelings about Harlan Ellison as a person, which has kind of kept me from you know, getting to this, I decided I finally should read it. I was reading An Informal History of the Hugos by Jo Walton, and I got to the year where a bunch of stories from this were nominated, and I just got really excited about it. So that's why I went out and got this. So let me tell you some of the people who are in this. We've got stories by Lester Del Rey, which is a name I know, but I don't know anything about him. Robert Silverberg, Frederick Pohl, Philip Jose Farmer, Miriam Allen DeFord, who's a woman I've never heard of. Robert Bloch, Harlan Ellison has a story in here himself. Brian Aldiss, Howard Rodman, Philip K. Dick, Larry Niven, Fritz Leiber, Joe L. Hensley, never heard of him. Paul Anderson, David R. Bunch, James Cross, Carol M. Schwiller, Damon Knight. I don't think I've ever read a story by Damon Knight. I mean, I know his name, but Theodore Sturgeon, Larry Eisenberg, Henry Slesar, I'm not sure how to say that, Sonia Dorman, John T. Sladek, Jonathan Brand, Chris Neville, R.A. Lafferty, J.G. Ballard, John Brunner, Keith Laumer, Norman Spenrad, Roger Zelazny. That one is Auto da Fe, and I really want to read that one. And then Samuel R. Delaney, which is I and Gomorrah. I have read that story and quite liked it. So some really fantastic names are in this, and yeah, I'm looking forward to this one now. Next up is The Embedding by Ian Watson. This one I've been on my list for a little while because it's one of the newest books that came out in the SF Masterworks line, but I bought it because Andrea from Infinite Text pointed out to me that it has aspects of like language and stuff in it, and that is always something that piques my interest. So this says, in a quiet British research institute, Chris Soule is investigating a strange language whose grammar could open up the vast psychic potential of the human mind. In the depths of the Brazilian jungle, an Indian tribe is discovered speaking a rhapsodic, drug-induced tongue. And in Earth's orbit, alien beings monitor our planet, effortlessly mastering the proliferation of human languages. What they offer is extraordinary, but will their price be too high? So, hey, anything with language, I will try that at least once. Not super psyched about the psychic potential aspect of this. I really don't like psychic ESP stuff in science fiction, but hopefully it's done well here. Then I couldn't resist getting the other book in the SF Masterworks line by John Crowley, so I got The Deep. Maybe there's one more, but this is the one I let myself get. I still have Engine Summer sitting on my shelf to read. I'm really big into John Crowley for his writing style, if nothing else, and I haven't read any of his science fiction yet. So this is what it says. For many generations, the just have been at war with the protectors. And their strange world, supported by a huge pillar poised in the vast and mysterious deep. Ritual, bloodshed, and sorcery have obsessed the inhabitants since the beginning of time. From the skies, the half-human, half-machine visitor enters this world, his purpose unknown. Is he a peacemaker, an observer, or a warrior the likes of which this planet has never seen before? This cover actually looks kind of cyberpunk to me. I don't think the book is cyberpunk though. Then I got Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement. This is another one that made it to my buy sooner rather than later list because I was reading Jo Walton's An Informal History of the Hugos. I want to say this book was also a big topic of discussion at the last Worldcon in San Jose. For whatever reason, I came away from Worldcon thinking I really need to buy this book, so I have it now. And interestingly also, this was mentioned in the introduction to Raft by Stephen Baxter as doing something kind of similar with the concept maybe. So we'll see what it says here. Mescaline, a vast, inhospitable, disc-shaped planet with oceans of liquid methane, snows of frozen ammonia, and gravity 700 times greater than Earth's, is a world too hostile for human explorers. But the planet holds secrets of inestimable value, and an unmanned probe that has crashed close to one of its poles must be recovered. Only the mesclinites, the small creatures so bizarrely adapted to their harsh environment, can help. Well, that also sounds very interesting. I think the similarity with Raft is that the gravity is what, 700 times greater than Earth, so that could be very interesting. A very different type of creature would develop under those environmental circumstances. So I am also really intrigued in this one, and I think the cover of it is very interesting. Who's this by? Oh, illustration by John Picasso. Well, there you go. And lastly, for this book haul, I got a copy of Fearsome Engine by Ian M. Banks. This is one of the hardcover SF Masterworks, which I'm not extremely fond of. They're about the same size as the paperback versions, but if they ever release paperback versions, I am too impatient to wait for that, I guess. So I read the Modern Masters of Science Fiction book about Ian M. Banks back in December, and I was fascinated by the overview of this book, and I thought I should just go ahead and get a copy because it's in the SF Masterworks line. So a quick description on the back. It is the time of the encroachment, and although the dimming sun still shines on the vast towering walls of Serifa Fastus, the end is close at hand. The king knows it, his closest advisors know it, yet still they prosecute the war against the clan engineers with increasing savagery. So an emissary has been sent, an emissary who holds the key to all their futures. I want to say this is the book where the characters are moving about in this gigantic structure, like almost like a building built for giants where a single room is large enough to be your world or something. And just the sense of scale implied by that, the incredibly large and the incredibly small, sounded very interesting. So it's gonna be weird, but I think I might like it. And that is it. Those are all the books that I have acquired in January. I'm going to make a good effort to read as many of these as possible within the next couple of months, since that will help me a lot in reaching my goal of trimming down my physical TBR this year. I'm trying to be strategic about that. So let me know if you have read any of these, or if you want to, let me know what you think I should prioritize. And thank you so much for watching as always. I will talk to you again soon, and until then, bye.